My name is Mindy R., and I am 35 years old. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and watched him pack, not with the casual efficiency he usually had for overnight work trips, but with intention. The expensive cream-colored luggage set was open on the bed, the one we only ever used for vacations. Silk shirts folded carefully. A garment bag hanging from the closet door. Shoes wrapped individually like they mattered more than the conversation he was trying to avoid. "Another management summit?" I asked, and my voice came out quieter than I expected. He didn't look up. "It's quarterly planning. You know this. I told you weeks ago." "I know the conference is in a different city," I said. "I also know the hotel you're actually booked at is a 5-star resort, and the reservation has 2 names on it." I paused, just long enough for the truth to breathe. "The second one is his." That did it. He froze, then slowly straightened up and turned to face me. There was no guilt in his expression, no fear, just irritation, sharp and unfiltered, like I'd inconvenienced him by noticing. "You went through my emails," he said flatly. "They were open on your tablet," I replied, "on the kitchen counter. Either you wanted me to see them, or you really didn't think I'd question anything." He scoffed and yanked the zipper on the suitcase. "You are so paranoid. He's my mentor, my boss. This is a team-building retreat for senior staff. You're acting like a child." A child. The word landed like ash in my mouth. "I'm not the one lying," I said, "and I'm not the one packing lingerie for a team-building exercise. Just tell me the truth." He laughed, short and ugly. "The truth? The truth is you're boring, Mindy. You suffocate me with this constant neediness. I can't deal with this energy right before something important." He grabbed his carry-on and headed for the stairs like the conversation was already over. That's when I found my voice again. "If you walk out that door to go meet him," I said, calm but steady, "we are done." He stopped, turned back, and his face twisted into something cruel. "No, you're done," he snapped. "I'm not letting you hold me back. If you hate this so much, you leave. And if you walk out that door, don't you dare come back. I'm sick of looking at your miserable face." I stared at him, and the man I'd built a life around, the man I'd supported, trusted, defended. Then I nodded once. "I won't." I walked past him, grabbed my keys, my laptop bag, and stepped out the front door. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, just breathing, feeling numb and strangely clear at the same time. Then I drove away, not knowing yet that I had just ended one life and started another. I didn't drive around aimlessly. I didn't do the dramatic thing where you sit in a parking lot crying and texting your best friend about how everything is over. I drove to a decent extended stay hotel on the other side of town, the kind with small kitchens and bland carpet, and I booked a room for 2 weeks like I was checking into a temporary version of my own life. The front desk clerk smiled, handed me a key card, and had no idea my entire world had just split in half. Inside the room, I sat on the stiff little sofa, opened my laptop, and did what I always did when I was scared. I made a plan. First, the money. We had a joint checking account, the one meant for household bills, groceries, utilities, the ordinary life we pretended was stable. I funded most of it, not because he couldn't, but because it was easier to keep things smooth, and I was tired of arguing about why our mortgage should matter more than his weekend spending. I transferred 75% of the balance into my personal savings. I left enough behind for gas, groceries, the bare minimum, just enough that he couldn't spin a story about me leaving him destitute. I wasn't trying to starve him. I was trying to stop being drained. Second, I called my lawyer. I'd met with him 6 months earlier, quietly, when the friendship with his coworker started setting off alarms I couldn't ignore anymore. Back then, my lawyer told me to wait until I had something concrete. Now I had a hotel reservation with 2 names on it, and a man who looked me in the face and dared me to leave. When he answered, I didn't waste time. "David," I said, voice flat, "it's Mindy. He's on his way to a resort hotel. He's with him. I want the divorce filing done, and I want him served at that hotel tomorrow morning." There was a pause. "Mindy," David said carefully, "are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "He told me not to come back, so I'm not." "It's aggressive serving him there," David warned. "It's not cheap, and it's going to get loud." "I don't care," I said. Embarrassment is the only language he understands. David sighed, businesslike now. He told me the retainer amount and the cost of the specialized process server who could get into a high-end hotel without being turned away. I paid it online within minutes. Then I ordered a pizza to the room because my body realized it hadn't eaten since morning. And grief and betrayal don't cancel hunger, they just make it feel ridiculous. I ate 2 slices and fell asleep in my clothes. My phone, which I'd left on Do Not Disturb, woke me up around 10 the next morning. It wasn't the ringing, it was the non-stop vibration against the nightstand, like an angry hornet trapped under glass. I glanced at the screen and felt something shift again, not panic, but confirmation. 17 missed calls from him, 8 from the man he was with, 4 from his mother. A streak of texts that looked like keyboard smash rage. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I made bad hotel coffee first. I stood by the window, watching cars move like normal life hadn't just been detonated. Then I pressed play on the first voicemail. His voice was whispering, but the whisper was screaming. "Mindy, what is this? What the hell is this? A man just knocked on my door. He asked if I was..." He choked on the words. "He served me divorce papers in front of him. Are you insane?" The second voicemail, louder, furious. "You are a psychopath. You did this to humiliate me. He's my boss, Mindy. You ruined everything. Call me back right now. You are going to fix this." The third voicemail, full on crying. "We can talk. It was a mistake. Please, I'm at the hotel. Just come here. Just call me." Then the voicemail from the man he was with. His voice was calm, condescending, like he was the adult stepping in to manage a tantrum. "Look, Mindy, I think we got off on the wrong foot. He's very emotional. Serving papers at the hotel is low class, unprofessional. Why don't you be a grown woman and talk this out when we're back?" I deleted every voicemail. Then I texted David. "They've been served. Now what?" He replied almost instantly. "Now we lock down assets. The house was yours pre-relationship, correct?" "Correct," I typed back. "I've lived there 10 years. We've been together 3. "Good," David replied. "That simplifies things. But the appreciation during the relationship is still a factor. We need to sell to divide it unless you want to buy him out." "I don't want the house," I typed. "It's not a home anymore. Sell it." "Okay," David said. "We'll file for exclusive use and control of the property for the purpose of sale. In the meantime, find new living arrangements and do not speak to him." I looked at my phone, still buzzing like it was having a seizure, and did something I'd never done in my adult life. I turned it off completely. The silence that followed felt terrifying and clean, like stepping into a room after a fire has burned out. I sat there for a moment, feeling that hollow finality settle in. This was real. I had just blown up my life because he had already blown it up first. And now, for the first time, I wasn't going to fix it. 2 weeks later, I was living in a small, furnished one-bedroom apartment I'd leased for 6 months. Beige walls, generic art, furniture that felt like it had never belonged to anyone. It had no personality, which was exactly what I needed. The Do Not Disturb sign on my phone was permanent. David handled all communication, and from the way he sounded when we spoke, the messages he was getting were unhinged. They cut their work trip short and flew back the day after the papers were served. I knew this because when he realized his keys still worked and I hadn't changed the locks, he let himself into the house and found it empty. No clothes in the closet, no toothbrush in the bathroom, no books on the shelves. I'd paid a moving company a rush fee to pack my things and put them in storage. Everything that mattered to me was gone. Everything that mattered to him was exactly where he'd left it. His first call was to David, demanding to know where I was, why all my stuff was gone, whether this was some kind of joke. David told him calmly that I was securing new living arrangements and that all communication regarding the property would go through counsel. He did not take that well. When yelling at a lawyer didn't work, he tried a new tactic. He drove to my brother's house unannounced at 10 on a Tuesday night, pounding on the door like the world was ending. My brother called me immediately, his voice somewhere between confused and irritated. He said my ex looked like a drowned rat, crying and claiming I'd abandoned him, that I was selling the house out from under him. I sighed and told my brother the truth, that he'd been cheating with his coworker and that I'd served him while they were together on a trip. There was a long silence on the line. Then my brother said, dryly, that explained why he kept yelling about me ruining his career. Apparently the cheating part hadn't made it into the victim narrative. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. David called me the next morning and sounded tired. He said my ex had filed for an emergency restraining order. My stomach dropped. On what grounds? I asked, because I hadn't seen or spoken to him since I left. David explained the allegations. a supposed history of coercive control, claims that I'd managed all the finances and left him homeless and penniless, that serving him at the hotel was designed to terrorize him and had caused panic attacks. It was the most predictable move in the book, and it still rattled me. David told me to be at the courthouse the next morning and to stay calm. The courthouse hallway was sterile and cold. He was already there with his lawyer, dressed down on purpose, hair messy, eyes wide, performing fragility. When he saw me, he flinched just enough to be noticed. Inside the courtroom, his lawyer painted a picture of a dependent partner terrified by a cruel, controlling woman who vanished and cut him off. A lie layered over another lie. When it was David's turn, he didn't raise his voice. He laid out dates, quotes, documents. He told the judge that my ex had ordered me to leave and not come back, and that I had complied. He presented the hotel reservation with both names. He showed the bank statement of the joint account I'd left money in, and the record of it being drained within 24 hours. The judge listened, unimpressed. She asked if my ex was employed. Yes. Asked if he was homeless. He was staying with a friend. She denied the motion, stating there was no evidence of harassment and that this was a civil matter for family court. As I stood to leave, my ex stared at me with a look that wasn't sadness or regret. It was pure resentment, the kind that forms when entitlement finally meets a wall. After the restraining order failed, the focus shifted to the house. He couldn't get it outright, but he could make selling it miserable. When we listed it, an offer came in immediately, way over asking, clean and easy. Then his lawyer filed an emergency injunction claiming he had significant personal property still inside. David called me and asked what property. I told him his mother and sister had filled a truck during a full weekend access. The claim named an antique armchair, inherited china, and something called the Celestial Weave. The Celestial Weave was a massive art installation he'd commissioned years ago and bolted into the living room wall, a tangle of metal and glass I'd hated from day one. David understood instantly. He told the court we were happy to return it, presented quotes to remove it properly and repair the wall, with costs deducted from proceeds, or to junk it outright. The judge called it junk and allowed the sale to proceed. The smirk vanished from the other table. Then his father tried to intervene, calling my workplace and implying I was unstable and harassing his son. My boss called me in, listened to the facts, and made it clear he didn't like bullies. The threats fizzled, but the stress took its toll. I wasn't sleeping. I lost weight. This wasn't a clean victory. It was attrition. Mediation finally ended it. 8 hours in a room where money mattered more than truth. The house sold. The appreciation was divided. Claims were made and dismantled. Deductions were applied for damage and debt. When the numbers were final, he looked at me and whispered that it wasn't fair. I didn't respond. Fairness had left the building a long time ago. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a pressure chamber. Nothing exploded all at once, but everything pressed in from every direction. The restraining order stunt had failed, the house sale was back on track, and yet he refused to let go. He couldn't win outright, so he tried to poison the ground instead. Every day brought a new email forwarded from David, a new accusation dressed up in legal language, a new attempt to reframe himself as the victim of some elaborate cruelty. It all came back to the house. He couldn't have it, but he could make sure I didn't enjoy letting it go. The Celestial Weave became his favorite weapon. He insisted it was a priceless custom piece of art, an heirloom in the making, something I was maliciously trying to sell out from under him. When we went back to court, he showed up again with that carefully cultivated look of wounded innocence. His lawyer argued that the piece had emotional and artistic value, that it was integral to his identity, that my decision to sell the house amounted to cultural vandalism. David didn't flinch. He calmly explained that the piece was bolted into the wall, legally a fixture, and presented 2 quotes, one from a licensed contractor to remove it carefully, repair the wall, and repaint at a cost of $4,800 to be deducted from my ex's share. The other from a junk removal service for $600. Her choice. The judge looked at the photos, looked at the quotes, then looked at my ex and said plainly that the sale would proceed. If he wanted the art, he could pay to remove it. If not, he could forfeit it. The word junk was used. I watched his face collapse in slow motion. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, my boss called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, the way people do when they've been dragged into a mess they didn't ask for. He told me my ex's father had called, claiming I was unstable, that I was harassing his son, that I was creating professional risk. He implied business consequences if I stayed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. This was the first move that actually scared me. I didn't argue. I handed my boss David's card and asked him to call, to get the facts. He did. When the call ended, my boss leaned back and said something I'll never forget. He said he hated bullies, and that no one got to threaten his team through the back door. He told me to keep the drama out of the office, but he wasn't going to sacrifice me to protect someone else's ego. I walked out shaking, not with relief, but with the realization of how close I'd come to losing everything over someone else's entitlement. By then, I wasn't sleeping. I'd lost weight without trying. My life felt like a constant series of defenses, not a victory, a siege. The mediation date arrived like a long-delayed verdict. 8 hours in a beige conference room with stale coffee and legal pads. He showed up with his lawyer, and in a move so audacious it almost made me laugh, the man he'd cheated with was sitting in the waiting area, rubbing his back, fetching coffee, offering moral support like this was some kind of performance. I didn't look at either of them. Money was the real language in that room. The house had sold, despite his efforts. The appreciation value was laid out, $180,000. His legal share was $90,000. He demanded rehabilitative support, claiming professional and emotional damage. David dismantled it piece by piece, pointing out that my ex was still employed, had even received a raise after the work trip, and that the trauma he cited was a divorce triggered by his own infidelity. Then came the deductions, half the cost to remove the celestial weave, credits for undisclosed damage it had hidden, marital credit card debt he'd run up after separation on wardrobe and travel. The final number landed hard, $75,600. That was it. The sum total of what 3 years of marriage and months of chaos amounted to. He stared at the number and whispered that it wasn't fair, that he'd put his stamp on the house, decorated it, made it beautiful. David closed his binder and said the number again, slower. My ex stood so fast his chair screeched. He told me I'd regret this, that I'd be alone forever, that I was cold and empty. He stormed out past the man in the hallway who looked suddenly uncertain about the role he was playing. I sat there, numb, not triumphant, just finished. When it finally ended, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a long exhale after holding my breath for months. The paperwork was signed, the funds transferred, the house sold, and the noise, emails, motions, threats, thinned into nothing. I was still in the beige apartment, the one that had been a placeholder for a life I didn't recognize yet, unpacking the last box from storage when the notification came through. The number hit his account, $75,600. He texted me from a new number a minute later, saying I destroyed his life over money. I stared at it, waiting for the sting that never arrived. He still didn't get it. He probably never would. I forwarded the message to David, blocked the number, and went back to folding sweaters. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. My boss stopped looking at me like I was a risk. The threats from his father faded. The coworkers who'd tiptoed around the subject went back to asking about deadlines and weekend plans. I slept through the night again. The weight I'd been carrying, anticipation, defense, readiness, fell off in pieces. Not all at once, but enough to notice. I heard through the same small web of acquaintances that his life had shrunk. The man who once strutted through my living room talking about influence and trajectory was now explaining gaps on his resume. The affair partner was transferred to another branch after his wife found out, not because I told anyone, but because secrets don't stay secret when people start panicking. The romance that thrived in hotel hallways didn't survive daylight and consequences. My ex moved back in with his parents. He told anyone who would listen that he'd been wronged, that I was cold, that I'd turned on him. The stories changed depending on the audience. I stopped listening. I didn't become bitter, I became precise. I noticed how people spoke when they wanted something. I noticed how apologies sounded when they were actually about accountability instead of leverage. I learned the difference between being kind and being convenient. I learned that silence isn't weakness when it's chosen. It's boundaries without spectacle. Some nights I missed the house. Not the walls, but the idea of it. The version of myself I thought I'd be there. I let that grief pass, the way I let everything else pass now, without trying to fix it. Other nights I sat on the floor with a mug of tea and felt something like gratitude for the first time in a long while. Gratitude that the door closed when it did. Gratitude that I walked out instead of negotiating my own erasure. Dating crossed my mind and then drifted away again. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't in a hurry. I paid attention to how it felt to choose myself without needing to justify it. I rebuilt routines slowly, morning walks, cooking real meals, calling my sister just to laugh, planning trips I actually wanted to take. I stopped explaining the past to people who hadn't earned the context. If there's a lesson here, it isn't about revenge or clever exits. It's about recognizing the moment when love becomes a ledger and deciding you're done balancing it. I didn't ruin his life. I stopped subsidizing it. I stopped translating my boundaries into apologies. I dropped the rope, and gravity did the rest. I don't need a happy ending. I have an honest one. The quiet apartment, the steady work, the mornings that belong to me. The certainty that when someone tells me who they are, I believe them and I act accordingly.